In this tutorial, we're going to go over frequency and sound localization. Sound localization is the process of determining the location of a sound source. The brain utilizes subtle differences in intensity, spectral and timing cues to allow us to localize sound sources. Frequency can also play an important part in this, as our ears pick up clues differently for high frequency or bright sounds compared with low frequency sounds. And what this means for us in the audio world is that panning becomes much more obvious and effective with high frequency instruments than it is with low frequency ones. So we should focus our attention more on what we can actually notice and worry less about what the listener will probably never hear, and would just cause problems in a less than ideal playback system. So let's look at some sounds with varying frequencies and notice how panning affects them differently. So let's start off with this bass guitar. Notice it doesn't have much high frequency information. Let's see what happens when we pan it. Notice we barely notice it. That's because without much high frequency information, our ears don't notice it moving as much. Let's compare that with an acoustic guitar. It's pretty bright. Now let's pan that. Even with slight moves, we actually hear the difference. So in a dense mix, just moving it just to the right or left can still be pretty effective. Or if we doubled it and pan one left and one to the right, it's pretty effective at leaving a hole in the middle, because all the bright jangliness is pretty hard left and right. Let's hear that with a clean guitar. Now with this clean guitar, it's also pretty bright. And it's played up high on the neck, so if we pan this, even slightly, we can really hear that happening. So it's effective. The same will happen with high frequency percussion, like a hi-hat. So with this hi-hat sound, we don't have to pan it hard left or hard right. Just a little off center will still be noticeable, which is also true for a shaker. I'm panning it just a bit to the left and right, but it's still very noticeable. So where we place this is quite effective. And if we add a tambourine to this, we can pan them to the opposite side, but not completely, and still have it be effective. Now let's check out some synths. Starting with this bass synth. Notice again, there's not much high frequency information in here. So let's see what happens if we pan it. It's not very effective. Let's try a different synth bass. And notice, even though this is a bass sound, it does have top-end information. Quite a bit of it. So let's try panning this. That's still effective. Let's try filtering it out so we can hear what's happening. We add a low-pass filter to this. To remove the top end, now it's panning. it's nowhere near as effective. So we could tell that the brightness of the sound is really affecting that panning. Let's check out this synth. Again, it's pretty bright. Let's pan it. So the panning is very effective. But again, we put a low pass filter on it. And now try to pan it. We barely hear it moving. Let's check out this synth. Now the top end on it is often called spit, which gives it that really bright top end. That's going to make this sound very easy to pan. Check it out. It really seems to move. So just moving it a little bit to the left or right is still effective. Now let's check out this other synth. Now at first, this sounds pretty bright, so you think it's going to pan very easily. But also notice, it doesn't have much transient information. There's not a very good attack to it. So it's softer attacks. We're not hearing that timing information. So if we pan this, even though it's pretty bright, not hearing those percussive attacks makes it harder to hear if it's being panned. But we still notice it being panned. It's just not as noticeable. Let's check out this pad. Again, it's pretty warm sounding. Not much attack. Let's try panning this. Again, it's barely noticeable. And the same with this synth. We barely hear it moving. But when we use those brighter synths, like this one here, we can really hear the attack and the top end. In fact, this is a stereo synth. So notice, you don't hear much from the middle. All that brightness is on the outside, leaving space for other things to be in the middle. We'll go over later how to create that effect, but just notice the space in the middle. And that's also effective with bass synths. Let's check out this one. Again, it's a bass sound, so you think you're not going to hear much spatial information. But we actually do, because this synth bass has a lot of attack and a lot of top end. Now just to show you the difference, let's filter this a bit. Again, we use a low pass. And notice how this sounds a bit more mono. And now if I pull it up, notice how it starts to sound more stereo. It gets wider. It's pretty effective. And it shows you how the top end and attack affects the localization or how the sound is panned. So that's pretty much the idea of frequency and sound localization. Let's move on to the next video and explore more.